22,000 of those people are suicides. Nothing that Mr. Ector has offered would help with that horrible statistic of 22,000 people committing suicide. There also is nothing here that talks about the 2-year-old who shoots the 3-year-old, because an irresponsible gun owner leaves that gun under the pillow, between the mattress, on the couch, in the glove box, wherever. So, you know, there's nothing that we've talked about today, almost with the exception, I mean, we've only talked really about homicides and defensive use of guns, and we've ignored 2/3 of the gun violence deaths in our country. 2/3. Think about that. Out of every 3 gun violence, 2 are suicides. And children killing children. It happens daily, daily. So I don't know if we have an agreement here or not, but there is a public health crisis in our country. And if we had anything else that was killing 33,000 people in our country, we would do something about it. We would research it. We would do prevention. Think of Zika. Think of Ebola. Those are addressed in our country as public health issues. And gun violence is a public health issue, and we need to treat it as such. It's not just a defensive kind of thing. It's a public health issue. 33,000 of our citizens die every year, year after year after year, and we need to have the courage to step up and acknowledge that and do something about it.
Mr. Ector, the follow-up to you is, even though people may desire to kill others any way they can, doesn't access to a firearm allow them to accomplish that far more effectively than if they had to rely on, let's say, a knife?
What difference does it make, really? It's not a gun violence issue. It's a violence issue. Whether I shoot you to death, or I stab you to death, I strangle you to death, I hold your head under a bunch of water in a tub or a swimming pool. There's this fixation with the anti-gun people, this made-up term, gun violence. There isn't gun violence, there's violence. Earlier today, she talked about the purpose of guns is to kill people. No, it's actually to save lives. More lives are saved with guns than are destroyed by them. With regards to suicides, regardless of what tool they use, a person who is suicidal will kill himself anyway. We've seen people jump off of buildings. We've seen people step in front of traffic, in front of trucks, people who park in front of trains, people who point toy guns at police officers, death by cop. Suicide is a problem. But you know what? It's not a gun problem. It's a people problem. With regards to guns and violence in general, we don't have a gun problem. We have a violence problem. Okay? There's this war on guns, and they're absolutely, the antis are fixated on them, despite the fact that we have a constitutional right to keep and bear them.
Thank you. So let's move on to the question directed towards you. And Dr. Brundage actually alluded to the issue. So there are a massive amount of accidental shootings each year. There might be over 100 children killed in a year coming across someone else's firearm and shooting themselves. And in a 5-year span, just to punctuate that, there were 6 documented cases of dogs shooting people. Doesn't that bring to mind the need to have mandatory safety training of some nature for everyone who's going to purchase a firearm to protect themselves and those around them?
Accidental deaths, particularly with firearms, is on a downward trajectory. It has been for the last 30 years, and it will continue to go down based on the work that safety advocates and training has already provided. Should it be mandatory? No, but you know what? Average person who buys a firearm has has absolutely no clue as to how it works, they're going to get training anyway. I just say it shouldn't be mandatory because it's associated with a fundamental, constitutionally recognized right. Let us look at accidental deaths and put them in the proper perspective. Looking at some data just a couple of years ago from the National Safety Council, accidental deaths for people aged 1 through 42. Car accidents, 42,000. Drugs poisoning, 39,000. Falls, 25,000. Fires, 2,700. Choking, 2,500. Drowning, 2,000. Shootings, 600. This is from the ages of 1 to 42. The other thing I want to point out, yes, gun owners have an absolute duty to make sure that they keep those firearms away from children. And you know what? If they're not, hold them accountable. Don't punish everyone else. Statistic I saw just the other day, and yes, it was in John Lott's book, The War on Guns. For the year 2015, it was talking about accidental shootings, children coming across those firearms in a home. There were 94. However, unattended swimming pools came in at 400, 4 times the number. Who's banning swimming pools? Those are the bigger issue, but that does not absolve responsible gun owners from securing their guns from small children. And no, training should not be mandatory.
Rebuttal, Dr. Brundage?
Whew, yeah. So far this year, there have been 21 children in Michigan killed. Teens, 74. Defensive use of guns in Michigan in 2016 to date, 29. Defensive use of guns in 2015, defensive use of guns in Michigan, 69. This is from the Gun Violence Archive. I would encourage all of you to be familiar with that. It's well-researched, it's well-reported, it's constantly updated, and it talks about what's in the press. So I think that's something that I want you to know. Also, I wonder why the NRA, and I don't know if Mr. Ector agrees with this or not, why don't we have smart gun technology? When I was a kid, or when I was a young parent, my kids were flopping around in the car, in the back seat, standing up, whatever. We don't do that anymore. We make them be in the child's seat. We've taken preventive measures. My early cars didn't have anti-lock brakes. We didn't have seat belts. All of that could be considered driving smart technology. There is similar smart technology that is available for guns. Finger identification, wrist bracelets that you can use, locks where you can have your gun accessible and next to your bed, pointer, ring, it snaps open, you've got the gun if there's an intruder. So why is the NRA not supporting this kind of research and making this readily available, requiring these kinds of things? It would help tremendously. In fact, there was a gun shop in California that tried to market some gun smart technology, and the NRA shut them down. So we could begin to curb deaths in America. And I guess any child's life is worth fighting for. And we do have a public health crisis in our country. 33,000 every year is 33,000 too many.
Thank you. Mr. Ector, you raised a very important point about the duties of gun owners to be safe, to keep their weapons secure. Many people, though, clearly by the statistics, don't do that. Shouldn't it then just be a requirement, even if it's a short informational session before they purchase their weapon the first time, to make sure they at least know basic things. Otherwise, wouldn't they be a danger to the public, having a weapon they do not know how to properly utilize or secure?
You know, I actively follow cases locally, particularly cases in which individuals have not been responsible with their firearms, in cases where children have actually come into contact with those guns. In the vast majority of those cases, we're talking about people who had firearms who were prohibited from having access to having a firearm. So, to say that for the most part, that we should allow people engaging in criminal behavior, whether we should let that show us the way, the law-abiding people who can be responsible with firearms, to be subject to further legislation. I don't think that there's any gun owner out there that would want something unfortunate to happen to their child or some other child that should be visiting their domicile or their residence. It's absurd to believe that the government actually knows better than the actual parents, the actual temperament, intelligence that is definitely apparent to that child. We've seen gun proponents tell us how reasonable it is for citizens in Washington, D.C., that they couldn't have a gun in their home and that they had to have it disassembled and locked up in a box with chains around it so they couldn't defend themselves. With regards to smart guns, it's a lot of puff, smoke, and mirrors. The technology doesn't exist. I've looked at it. I do not want any electronics in my firearm. I've seen some prototypes, some mess that they're putting together, and I think one prototype was a .22 caliber firearm that would cost $2,000, and every time they fired it one time it broke. I don't want to have some issue with regards to electronics coming between me and my safety. Smart guns is a non-starter. It'll never happen. As far as the NRA, they've never blocked smart guns. They said let the free market determine that, and you know what? The free market doesn't want smart guns. They're anything but.
Dr. Brundage, how do you respond to the contention that in response to having to children and other accidental shootings, that stricter regulation is punishing the majority, for the negligence of the few?
Okay, I don't think there's anything as an accidental shooting. There are irresponsible gun owners, but there are not such things as accidental shootings. So I wanted to say that, and then it's getting late, so I want to say just a tad about politics. Hillary is not saying she is going to repeal the Second Amendment. Tim Kaine is a gun owner himself. He said clearly, I'm not coming after guns. So I just want to get that out of the way. And I also wonder, given some of the remarks that Mr. Ector has made, about, the gun owner is the responsible person of that gun. So let's say we have concealed carry in the school and somebody has a gun, and I think an adolescent or a high school person could easily take that away. Who's responsible there? I think it's a citizenry that allows that gun in school in the first place. I guess that's enough. It's really late.
All right, well, we have run out of time.
Let me throw my political point out here. Hillary is coming for your guns, make no mistake about it. The Supreme Court got Heller wrong. They got the McDonald decision wrong. She's even gone so far as to say that she supports and backs Australian-style confiscation of guns of all the citizens. So let's make sure we're perfectly clear on that. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you both very much for Thank you again. You can talk with both of the panelists as long as they're here. Make sure to look at materials, check out both of their websites. Thank you all for attending very much, and thank you again to everyone who's going to watch this at a later point. Good night, everyone.